You know those moments where you just cringe at how you reacted. Maybe you panic before that, like photo shoot.
Oh, yeah. Or that feeling of dread for something you actually signed up for, like improv class.
Exactly. And you're thinking, is this just me? Am I stuck being like this forever?
It's a really common feeling, that sense of, being locked into your default settings, especially under stress. Our habits can feel so persistent.
Totally. And that feeling, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We've gone through all the sources you sent over, the articles, the research, your notes, and pulled together this deep dive just for you.
Hmm.
We're extracting the key nuggets about personality, what it really is, whether it's actually fixed, and crucially, what the sources say about a practical path to change.
Yeah, our mission here is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Unpack the main ideas from this material. We want to give you a clear picture of what these sources suggest about the potential for change and the process involved.
Okay, let's jump in. Looking at these sources, how do they actually define personality? What are we talking about beyond just, like, what music you enjoy or if you're having a bad day?
That's a really important distinction. The scientific definition we're seeing here isn't about your likes or your temporary mood.
Right.
Personality is more about your habitual ways, the automatic ways you tend to think, feel, and act. One source even called it the texture of your soul.
Ooh, texture of your soul. I like that. It sounds deep.
It does, doesn't it? It captures that consistency in how you usually engage with the world.
Okay, so what about that old idea? The one that says your personality is basically set, like plaster, by the time you're 30.
Yes. The plaster hypothesis.
Yep.
That definitely has been around for a while.
Right, like you hit 30, and that's it, you're baked.
Well, what's really interesting in the sources is how newer research, especially things like twin studies, really challenges that.
Right.
They show that, yeah, genetics play a role, maybe accounting for, say, 30 to 50% of the differences between people. But that leaves a big chunk, 50 to 70%, influenced by other things, your environment, your experiences, even your friends.
So influenced, definitely, but not carved in stone.
Exactly. The sources are quite clear. It's not fixed.
Which immediately makes me think, okay, potential for change.
Right.
But how? What's the actual process these sources describe? It doesn't sound like it's usually some big sudden epiphany.
No, and that's a really critical point they make. Significant personality change isn't typically like flipping a switch.
Right.
It's usually gradual. It often takes months, sometimes years, of real concerted effort. And the mechanism they keep pointing to is basically performing the behaviors associated with the traits you want more of.
Performing the behavior. So less about feeling different first and more about just doing the things, like intentionally acting the part, kind of fake it till you make it.
That's pretty much the core mechanism they highlight. It means deliberately changing your daily actions, your thought patterns, again and again. The sources give examples, right? Like, want to be more conscientious, maybe start using schedules, to-do lists, really planning things out.
Okay.
Or if you want to be more extroverted, it could mean consciously saying yes more often when spontaneous social stuff comes up.
Right.
It's that consistent practice.
And your mindset, believing change
Yeah.
is possible. That seems like it would have to matter, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The sources mention the growth mindset, believing traits can change. They talked about it with empathy, I think.
Yeah.
People who believed empathy could grow were more likely to actually try to be more empathetic. But that raises a question, where does the energy for all that effort come from, especially when it feels awkward or uncomfortable?
Right. And that's where connecting it to your values comes in, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like that ACT approach of acceptance and commitment therapy.
Precisely. ACT, as mentioned in the sources, suggests a really powerful driver is acting in line with your core values, even when it feels bad. Think about that improv dread again. You feel the stage fright, the discomfort, but you go on anyway because maybe you value growth or connection.
Or volunteering when it feels boring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It might feel tedious, but you do it because you value community or helping others. Aligning actions with values gives you the why, the fuel to push through the discomfort.
Okay, so it's not just random actions, but actions tied to what matters to you. And the sources also seem to say that just doing the behavior itself starts to change you almost regardless of your initial feelings.
That's another critical point they make. Studies, like the one on conscientiousness or even the author talking about volunteering, they suggest that simply doing the behaviors tied to a trait can actually increase that trait over time. It stops being just something you force yourself to do externally. The act itself starts to reshape your internal patterns. It shifts from something you do to becoming part of your nature.
Wow. Okay, so let's recap the main takeaways from these sources. Personality. Influenced by our genes and life, sure, but definitely not set in plaster.
Right. Not fixed.
And changing it isn't usually sudden. It's mainly about consistent, deliberate effort, actually doing the behaviors of the person you want to become.
And anchoring those actions in your deeper values can give you the motivation you need, especially when it's tough.
It really paints a picture where you have more agency than you might think. You're not just stuck. You can actively shape things through your actions.
That seems to be the core message.
So for you listening right now, what does this all mean? It suggests maybe those moments of cringing or that dread we talked about. They aren't necessarily permanent states.
They could even be signals pointing towards a value that's important to you.
And that small, consistent actions chosen because they align with what you care about could be the most practical way forward, the path to becoming who you aspire to be.
Which leaves us with a thought for you to take away from this deep dive. What's one small behavior, just one thing, that aligns with the value you hold deep down that you could maybe practice today? Maybe even right after this. Just do it regardless of how you feel about it in this exact moment.